Hello, thanks for selecting this training. This is Goodwill Industries of the Inland Northwest training on sexual harassment and discrimination awareness. This is for managers and supervisory level employees. If at any time that you need to pause this training, there is a pause button at the bottom of the screen. Please make sure that you have a pen and paper ready in case any questions arise. If questions do arise during the training, write those down and then email those to your direct supervisor and the HR manager so those questions can be answered. If after the training you have no questions, also please email your direct supervisor and the HR manager. In that email, we'll want you to state that you've received the training, that you understand the training, and you're ready for the acknowledgement. Once that email has been received, you will receive another email with that acknowledgement attached. It's your responsibility to please print off that attachment, sign the acknowledgement, print it and date it, and then send the original to the HR department. This particular document is going to go into your HR personnel file, and that will be proof that you've had the training. Now, this training is mandatory and it is given annually. Also, if you want to review this policy, it is located in our Goodwill handbook, and in addition to that, all of our policies are located on Goodwill's intranet SharePoint. The link is on the left side under Note. So the purpose of this training is to answer questions such as what is sexual harassment, how do you as a supervisor recognize sexual harassment, once you become aware of a situation involving sexual harassment, what do you need to do, and what is Goodwill's policy on sexual harassment. Also, we're going to ask what is discrimination, how can you as a supervisor recognize discrimination, once you become aware of a situation involving discrimination, what do you need to do? And also Goodwill's policy on discrimination. So the goal here during this training is, of course, sexual harassment awareness, discrimination awareness, harassment awareness, and Goodwill's policy on these. Let's look at a few statistics here. The average cost of defending a sexual harassment complaint is about $250,000. And this does not include the cost to pay the judgment. In addition to that, sexual harassment costs employers $1 billion a year in absenteeism, low morale, and new employee training, and also replacement costs. Again, this does not include judgments in any civil court cases. Now, 90 to 95% of sexually harassed individuals will suffer some type of stress reaction, and these could include anxiety, depression, headaches, sleep disorder, weight loss or weight gain, lowered self-esteem, diminished ambition, guilt, isolation, drug or alcohol abuse, and sexual dysfunction. So who is liable? Goodwill, the employer, will be liable for any harassment, sexual harassment, or discrimination that takes place that is not addressed. In addition to that, you as a supervisor could be named as a co-defendant. You can be held personally liable under the human rights law. You can also be sued under common law, or other civil actions could be brought against you. So you're asking yourself, well, am I a supervisor? Well, we have a definition here listed for you. We're saying an individual qualifies as an employee's supervisor if that individual has the authority to recommend tangible employment decisions affecting the employee. So basically, if you direct an employee's daily work activities, you are considered a supervisor. I know it when I see it. Sexual harassment is a difficult type of employment discrimination to decipher and to deal with. As a manager, you need to be able to identify sexual harassment and be familiar with the legal implications. Also, as a manager, it's best to err on the side of caution. Take a conservative approach. Make sure that you're always monitoring your own behavior. You want to set a clear, appropriate example for your employees. You want to make sure that you leave no impression that you're callous towards uninterested or preventing and handling any sexual harassment conduct. And remember, Goodwill's policy is zero tolerance when it comes to sexual harassment. A few questions that are important to ask yourself. How do you as a supervisor or manager maintain friendly yet professional relationships at work? Also, what kinds of behavior at work make you feel uncomfortable? How would a charge of sexual harassment impact your personal life and your work life? Is it important to maintain a separation between personal and professional lives? why is this particular question or this particular action so important for supervisors and managers? Let's go over a short history. This is the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which says sex and other forms of discrimination in the workplace are prohibited. It shall be unlawful employment practice for an employer to fail or refuse to hire or to discharge any individual with respect to his compensation, terms, conditions, or privileges of employment because of an individual's race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. So this law makes it illegal to discriminate against someone on the basis of race, color, religion, national origin, or sex. The law also makes it illegal to retaliate against a person because the person has complained about discrimination, filed a charge of discrimination, or participated in an employment discrimination investigation or a lawsuit. The law also requires that employers reasonably accommodate applicants and employees' sincerely held religious practices, unless doing so would impose an undue hardship on the operation of the employer's business. So basically, it's saying the Civil Rights Act of 1964 prohibits discrimination in the workplace based on these protected classes. And remember, harassment is only one type of discrimination. Now, the Civil Rights Act was amended in 1991, and this amendment, what it did was affirm the rights for women, individuals with disabilities, and religious minorities. It also increased punitive damages. So parties could now obtain jury trials and recover compensatory and punitive damages with this title and the ADA lawsuit involving intentional discrimination. So what are some practical tips for you as a manager? Well, train your employees and be watchful. Be prepared to address issues of privacy, religious beliefs regarding morality, sexuality, and employee rights. Also be prepared to help employees understand the boundaries between personal beliefs and workplace expectations here at Goodwill. So what is sexual harassment? We're defining sexual harassment as unwelcome, offensive conduct of a sexual nature that makes someone uncomfortable or him or her embarrassed. I think the majority of us, when we think of sexual harassment, think about men harassing women, and which is often portrayed in movies. However, conduct can also be female to male, same gender, and can include our customers, vendors, and our visitors. So the EEOC, their guidelines state sexual harassment is unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature constitutes sexual harassment when 1. Submission to such conduct is made either explicitly or implicitly to a term or condition of an individual's employment. 2. Submission or rejection of such conduct by an individual as used as a basis for employment decisions affecting such individuals. Or 3. Such conduct has a purpose or effect of unreasonably interfering with the individual's work performance or creating an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. Now, there are 2 types of sexual harassment that the courts will look at. The first one is quid pro quo. Now, quid pro quo, what that means is an exchange something for something else, this or that. Now, this is the most obvious and direct type of sexual harassment. This is the one that you often see in movies. This occurs when there is some kind of job penalty or benefit will be given based on acceptance or rejection of a request for sexual favors. And this is barring proof that the conduct was not unwelcome. In court, there are no defenses for quid pro quo sexual harassment. The next one is hostile work environment. Now, this is where there are regular and repeated unwelcome and offensive sexual comments, innuendos, jokes, inappropriate touching, or other degrading or abusive conduct of a sexual nature. Now, these have to be something that the reasonable or average person would find intolerable. It also needs to be severe, and it needs to be pervasive. Now, hostile environment sexual harassment is often difficult to identify. However, it does happen, and it's just as important to address. Now, through several of the slides, this word has come up, unwelcome. It's a very important word when it comes to sexual harassment, discrimination, and workplace harassment. So a sexual advance, request for sexual favor, or sexually verbal or physical conduct must be unwelcome. The courts are not going to look at what the intent is. They're going to look at 2 factors. Those 2 factors are the alleged victim's perception and the sexual action that did occur. Again, it must be severe and it must be pervasive. As always, the best course of action is to assume any sexual conduct in the workplace is taboo. Remember, in sexual harassment claims, it's not going to be a matter of intent, it's going to be a matter of perception. The next few slides are just going to go over some pictures that have to do with different perceptions. So in this particular slide, they're asking, are the horizontal lines parallel or do they slope? They actually are parallel. How about in this picture? If you look closely, on one end you'll see the profile of a younger woman in a bonnet. And if you look from a different angle, you'll see an older woman. You can see her profile also, but more turned pronounced. A few of these I just threw in because they were very interesting when it came to perception. I'm not really sure which way's up, which way's sideways, where it ends or where it begins. This particular drawing is a flat surface and is all done with chalk. Again, this drawing here is also a flat surface and done with chalk. It's got a few more of these to go. This one, upright, says teach, and on the flip side, you can see where it says learn. So let's ask ourselves, what is offensive? Well, if you have to ask yourself, it probably is. So offensive conduct can be verbal, nonverbal, or physical. Some verbals are telling sexual stories or jokes, using four-letter obscenities, using terms such as sweetie, doll, babe, cutie, dearie, or honey, making sexual comments and innuendos about a person's body or appearance, probing into a person's sexual experience or his or her preferences. Now the second bullet here, using four-letter obscenities, we do have a work rule against that. So if you happen to swear, use profanity at work, you may not be in a position where sexual harassment or harassment is going to be filed against you. However, you may be in violation of a Goodwill work rule that has to do with obscene language. A few more verbals could be insisting on dates, making suggestive sounds or whistling at a person, or making quid pro quo demands and or threats. The first bullet here, insisting on dates. Individuals who work in the Human Resource Department, the IT Department, and the Accounting Department are not allowed to date employees here at Goodwill. However, two employees on the same level in the organization chart may be in a dating relationship. Some nonverbals are leering and oogling suggestively, following a person or blocking his or her way, showing sexually explicit pictures, cartoons, or other visuals, or making suggestive gestures or body movements. The third bullet here, showing sexually explicit pictures, cartoons, or other visuals, is on the rise. The reason for this is the emergence of smartphones. The majority of individuals nowadays do have smartphones, and in addition to having access to these on a regular basis, we have access to inappropriate text messages and the internet. Please be aware of your coworkers. It's best to leave your cell phone in your locker and only use your cell phone on your breaks, your lunch break, before or after work. Some of the nonverbal could be sending unwanted notes or other written material, or giving unwanted personal gifts. Again, you're seeing the word unwanted here. Some of the physical are touching a person's clothing or his or her hair, massaging a person's neck or his or her shoulders, and kissing, caressing, or pinching a person. So again, if you have to ask yourself, it probably is. Some more of the physical are leaning over, standing too close, brushing up against a person, or invading his or her personal space. That last bullet, invading his or her personal space, Please be aware that everyone has a personal bubble. If you're in somebody's bubble, you will most definitely notice they will either cross their arms or continue to back up or leave the conversation. An employer also is responsible for the safety of our employees in regards to our outside vendors and our customers. So be aware that Goodwill will also not tolerate any kind of behavior that's negative regarding our customers and sexual harassment, discrimination, or workplace harassment. Non-employee sexual harassment can include asking an employee for sexual favors and/or dates, or immediately. Employers are judged by the knew or should have known standard. So if we have an individual who is harassing one of our employees or discriminating against one of our employees, few options that we have are: one, we can stop doing business with a particular vendor, or we can also tell the customer they are no longer welcome. If you have a situation like this that arises, please call the HR department and/or your department director. Sexual harassment can also occur between two people of the same sex. An employer must protect the same-sex harassment just as it must protect against opposite-sex harassment. Make sure you're being proactive as a supervisor. Nobody will survive sexual harassment complaints without taking a proactive role. Also, never act independently of company policy or procedure. Again, always call your department director and/or the HR department. So what's your role as a supervisor? It's important to understand that sexual harassment is wrong and that it comes in many different forms. Now, understanding that sexual harassment is wrong, of course, is not enough. You also need to make sure that you're taking action that's prompt and appropriate if you see anything or hear anything or something's reported to you. So our responsibilities, we need to make sure that we take all sexual harassment complaints seriously. We treat all of our employees at Goodwill with respect, and we also monitor our own behavior. Goodwill takes a zero-tolerance stance towards sexual harassment. Make sure that you're reporting to your department director and the Human Resource Department immediately. Ignoring all but the most obvious conduct means that we're not doing our jobs to promote Goodwill's sexual harassment policy. We could be subjecting Goodwill and ourselves to legal liability. Failure to respond could subject you, as a supervisor, to disciplinary action. Make sure that you're continuously monitoring your own conduct. So monitoring your own behavior, you need to reflect on your own beliefs, attitudes, behaviors, and the manner of your communications. Make sure that you understand the issue of sexual harassment and recognize that certain behaviors are inappropriate in workplaces. False accusations have been made, and it's not your job to confront the complaining employee. Make sure that you never ignore a complaint. You as a supervisor have a legal obligation to hear all sexual harassment complaints and treat them all with the same degree of seriousness and professionalism. Report those immediately to your department director and the HR department. Remember again, sexual harassment is not all about men harassing women. General comments can be deemed hostile environment or sexual harassment. Here at Goodwill, we're proud of our diversity. We're not going to have any tolerance for remarks that are gender specific, derogatory, or stereotypical. Also, sexual harassment is not confined to just the workplace. Be aware of situations where extended workplace becomes the workplace, such as company-sponsored events, business trips, off-site meetings, and/or socializing after work. If a person feels that he or she is a subject of sexual harassment or discrimination, this is what we would like the individual to do. If he or she is comfortable, we would like the victim to inform the harasser that the conduct is unwelcome and it must stop. This is necessary to ensure that the person is not operating under the mistaken belief that the conduct at issue is not unwelcome. If the person is not comfortable, the employee should report it to their direct supervisor, any staff member, a department director, or the Human Resource Department. Once that has occurred, this individual will let that person know that the behavior is unwanted and must stop. You may be the first point of contact for a sexual harassment complaint. Also, if you witness sexual harassment, or discrimination, you're required to end the situation and report it, even if nobody complains about it. Remember, the best course of action is not always clear or easy. So how to address the individual when he or she is reporting sexual harassment or discrimination. Use active listening. Show that you're listening with your particular behavior that you're displaying. Make sure that you're being quiet. Make eye contact with the individual. Take notes. Also refrain from fidgeting. Paraphrase what was said to the speaker's satisfaction. Refrain from interrupting. Wait until the speaker is finished before you make any comment or ask any questions. Allow people to finish their own sentences. Also, there may be times when you need to ask questions. Good listeners ask probing and clarifying questions to get a good understanding of what he or she hears. Be extremely careful, though, while you're taking the report. Never substitute your judgment for the judgment of the complainant employee. The best course of action here, of course, is to listen carefully, write down the alleged facts, and report these immediately to your department director and the HR department. Also, treat every complaint as it being legitimate. Goodwill expects you as a supervisor to report issues or complaints immediately to the HR department and your department director. Remember, you are the first point of contact. You set the tone for all the action that follows, and first impressions of company policy are going to be formed, and first impressions are lasting. Now, if you appear insensitive and biased, you're going to give a negative impression to the employee. Employees talk, so the entire workforce will be aware of this. Also, the organization's zero tolerance statement and sexual harassment policy may be undermined, and management and the investigation process may lose some of its credibility. Make sure that you remain impartial and objective, and all harassment complaints deserve equal and consistent treatment. Now, if you see obvious acts of sexual harassment, or more subtle ones, you must report them immediately, even if no one's complaining about it. All questionable conduct must be reported. We have a zero tolerance policy for sexual harassment, discrimination, or workplace harassment, and you as a supervisor have a legal obligation to prevent and take prompt action. Now, there are several types of different complaints. You may have the direct hit complaint. Now, sexual harassment can be obvious or appear unannounced. It's not always male against female or supervisor to subordinate. The victim of the harasser can be of either sex. The harasser does not have to be the victim's supervisor. The victim can be an onlooker who finds this conduct offensive, and it can be against a customer, vendor, or one of our visitors. The murky water complaint. This is where the employee is less direct. The facts are much more murkier, and you have to ask yourself, is this sexual harassment? If you're not sure, please call. Every complaint needs to be taken seriously. As a supervisor, always err on the side of safety and caution. Refrain from passing judgment and comments, and make sure that there's a formal complaint. Document and report it to the HR department and your direct supervisor. The new or should have known complaint. It's a misnomer that there are no employee complaints. Even if you say you don't know, the company and yourself can still be held liable when facts show that company knew or should have known and nothing was done. If you know or you suspect, you are not to ignore it. You have an obligation to report suspected incidences, even in the absence of an employee complaint. It's critical that you as a supervisor project the right image. Be aware of your own actions and make sure you use common sense. You are constantly being scrutinized by all employees at all times. The complaining employee will try to obtain validation for the sexual harassment claim. Your job is only to get the facts and nothing more. Keep your thoughts, your opinions, and feelings to yourself. Listening skills are critical for projecting the right image. Listen carefully to everything the employee is saying. Focus on the complaint that's being made and document the information you've received. Sometimes the most critical piece of information are being relayed during this initial complaint process. Also, be aware of your demeanor. Body language and facial expressions often say more than words, such as, do you have your arms crossed or your legs crossed, or your hands clasped behind your head? We are often unaware of what our facial expressions are showing. Are we smiling, frowning? Please be aware of all these different types of body language. Now, the process Please be aware of several important factors. Confidentiality is guaranteed to the extent possible. Goodwill has a zero tolerance against any form of retaliation. Assure the employee that the situation is being taken seriously, the information is being relayed immediately, and he or she can be expected to be contacted as soon as possible. Remember, it's not your job to perform the investigation or to ask probing follow-up questions. It is your job to write down the following information. You're going to want to find out the name of the alleged harasser or harassers, what the relationship between the parties is, the alleged incident or incidences themselves, names of any witnesses, and whether the conduct was unwelcome. Memory alone is never a reliable record. Make sure that you're documenting the conversation, including comments you may have made to the complaining employee. Documentation and communication is critical to the outcome of investigations. Do not insist that the complaining employee sign off on the notes that you've taken. Make sure you contact your direct supervisor, department director, and the Human Resource Department immediately. Different complaining employees will need to be handled differently. The ultimate goal here is to document as many facts as possible and get those to the right people. Now, if you have an upset or angry employee, make every attempt to calm the employee without agreeing to any of his or her statements. Consoling is one thing, and downplaying the alleged offense is another. Make sure that you're being sensitive to the situation. You are the initial point of contact and a fact finder. You are not the employee's counselor. If you have the shy, inhibited, or embarrassed employee, the biggest challenge for this employee is to approach you or the supervisor in the first place. Most likely, they are going to be reluctant to give very much information. They need extra assurance about confidentiality. They need to be reassured of the policy against retaliation. Please don't show frustration or impatience with this particular type of employee. Next is the uncooperative employee. These employees insist that the information go no further or refuse to give all the facts. Never fall in the trap of failing to report. Make sure that you're being sensitive, but tell the employee it's your duty to report. Preventing sexual harassment is a top priority for the company and should be for you as well. Even if the employee has filed suit, the company has a duty to investigate and take corrective action. We also have the self-help employee. This individual will confront the harasser and tell him or her stop. If the harassment behavior ends and there's no complaint filed and you're aware of the situation, please still report the incident to the HR department and your direct supervisor. Now, if sometimes they'll confront the individual and the behavior does not stop. They may insist on taking personal action. Please never encourage this type of effort from the employee. Sometimes you'll run into the credibility problem employee. This employee has a credibility problem, such as they're a chronic rule violator. He or she may have a history of past disciplinary problems, or may be a poor performer. Please remain objective and take the complaint seriously. Never disclose your doubts or appear biased. You're not the judge and jury. You're only to document and to report. And the last one is the delayed reaction employee. Victims don't always report sexual offensive conduct immediately after it occurs. A few reasons could be he or she is embarrassed. They may have attempted at self-help, or they're hoping that sexual harassment will stop. You as a supervisor and Goodwill as an employer have the duty to hear the complaint, document it, report it, and investigate it. Never tell that employee that too much time has passed, that the incident passed and it's time to move on, or it's too late for any company action. Never express disapproval about the timeliness of his or her complaint. Ask why he or she had waited so long, or give the impression that the investigation will be less thorough because of his or her delay. Also, don't forget about yourself. You can also be the target of sexual harassment. If you find yourself in this situation, report it immediately to your department director or the Human Resource Department. Again, as always, we like to use the chain of contact. Speak with any staff person, department director, or human resource if you find yourself in this position. If the report is against your direct supervisor, please come directly to the HR department. Remember, reporting sexual harassment is the law, and it's the right thing to do. Now, beyond sexual harassment, many people work side by side with all different kinds of people. People with different races, genders, colors, abilities, ages, national origins, and religions. We usually work together and have no problems. However, we do know that sometimes discrimination is an issue that we have to address as an employer. Now, workplace discrimination can take many forms and it can involve many different people. So harassment means to trouble, worry, or torment someone on a persistent basis. A few examples here could be an employee repeatedly addresses a coworker with a derogatory comment or stereotype. The employee calls a coworker wearing a turban or a Hispanic coworker a derogatory name. Also, maybe an employee tries to get a coworker to resign by spreading untrue, malicious gossip about the coworker because of the coworker's disability. Discrimination. This occurs when a person or a group of people are treated differently from another person or group of people. Now, this could include race, color, gender, veteran status, religious belief, disability, marital status, sexual orientation, national origin, age, and genetic information. An example here could be a supervisor refusing to hire a well-qualified candidate because she is pregnant, or persistently commenting or kidding about a coworker's ancestry even after you've been asked to stop. Here at Goodwill, we have a no tolerance for retaliation. If or when you have an employee that files a complaint, please make sure that they're aware of this. Let's do a quick review of what we've learned so far. Any sexual remarks, jokes, pictures, or innuendos are taboo. Remember, if you have to ask yourself, it probably is. Report it immediately. Sexual harassment can be male to female, female to male, same gender. It can include our customers, vendors, and our customers. And our visitors and vendors. If I see any type of conduct that is inappropriate, it must end, and it must end fast, and it must be reported to the HR department and your direct supervisor. Again, sexual harassment and discrimination is unfair, it's unwelcome, unwanted, unacceptable, and it's unlawful. Again, there's two types of sexual harassment: quid pro quo, this for that, or 2, hostile work environment. So again, Goodwill's harassment policy. We have a zero tolerance when it comes to sexual harassment, or discrimination here at Goodwill. In addition to that, we have a zero tolerance for any form of retaliation. So what is our policy on sexual harassment? 5 words or less? I would say it's zero tolerance. Let's go through a few scenarios here. Case scenario 1. Hannah repeatedly asks Derek for a date. He refuses each time and tells her that he has a girlfriend, yet she persists. He clearly indicates that he's not interested. Come on, continued Hannah. Are you saying I have absolutely no chance? I say there is a 99.99% chance that you and I will ever get together, she says. So there's still a chance, she announces. Is this sexual harassment? Is the situation different if Hannah is a supervisor? Why or why not? Although sexual harassment frequently involves power relationships, sexual harassment may occur between any coworker and may not necessarily affect a reporting relationship. David's no answer indicates that the advances are unwanted. Hannah must leave him alone. Furthermore, if Hannah were his supervisor, she should understand that it's difficult. The more pertinent issue involves whether the recipient welcomes the advances or not. Scenario 2. David, shift supervisor. Chuck Smith congratulates another worker, a woman, on her outstanding work performance during a busy Saturday. He pats her on the back and compliments her on her physical strength. He also compliments her on her appearance. You've got to be the most attractive and athletic female donor service associate I've had the privilege of meeting, he says. Is this an example of sexual harassment? Is all touching off limits? This is sometimes a tough call. A pat on the back may not be intended as a sexual advance, yet may be unwanted by the recipient. In this time of litigation, some managers are choosing a hands-off approach and are congratulating employees by verbal means. A supervisor who massages the shoulders of a subordinate is asking for trouble. Now, regarding his statements, these are too personal Statements like, "I like your dress, and by the way, your legs look great," or "You look great," is off limits. Scenario 3. In an isolated office in the station, David and Tony look at pornographic websites on the internet. Both employees participate equally, and both seem to enjoy browsing the internet for sexually oriented sites. Is this scenario okay? What is considered a potential source of problem or problems in this scenario? Potential source of problems in this scenario are bystanders as well as appropriate use of company time and equipment. Bystanders may not welcome seeing pornographic images, and the company will no doubt prohibit the use and time and equipment. Most workplaces have policies regarding pornographic website, include screensavers, and office decorations. Ooh, lightning. Scott sends Rebecca, a female coworker, an email from his vacation spot on a beach to her private residence. He sends her a picture of himself in a Speedo and an X-rated story he wrote. He wants to know if she enjoyed the picture and the story. She indicates that the picture and the story were offensive and asks him not to send emails to her house. Scott suspects that Rebecca is a lesbian. Is this an example of sexual harassment? Why or why not? Sexual harassment can occur anywhere, but must have a negative impact on the work environment. This could be an example of sexual harassment if his unwanted sexual advances continue in the workplace, or if his outside advances are so severe as to have a negative impact on the recipient's work environment. Even though the incident took place outside the walls of the workplace, if the behavior affects the work relationship or work environment, it is usually considered sexual harassment. In addition, sexual orientation is a taboo topic in a work environment. Case scenario 5. Rosa is vice president of marketing at Easy Interactive Company and has hired Antoine just out of graduate school as her assistant. Sometime after Antoine started working at the company, Rosa tells him that the only way he can keep his job at Easy Interactive is by having sex with her. Antoine refuses and is fired a few months later for no reason. Is he the target of sexual harassment? If he is, what type of sexual harassment is this? Rosa's demand to Antoine, "Have sex with me or you're fired," is a clear example of the type of behavior most people recognize as sexual harassment. It represents the type of sexual harassment called quid pro quo harassment. Again, just to reiterate, if you have some questions that arose during this training, please make sure to email those to the HR manager and your direct supervisor. Once those questions have been answered, please do a follow-up email letting us know that you understood and you completed the training, at which time you will be sent the acknowledgement to print, sign, and send the original to HR. If you have no questions, please send an email stating you have watched the training and understood the training and have no questions, at which time you will also be sent the acknowledgement, which will be required to print, sign, and send the original to the HR department. Again, all of our policies are located on Goodwill's intranet shared point. Here on the left side, you can copy and paste it into your browser. Thanks again.